Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, along with our usual co-hosts, Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Pat Thorman. We, on this edition, are going to cover a lot of rookie talk, so strap in for that. We will also get to some news and notes early on, but first, you two, as you know, I like to ask a question that you are not prepared for so that we can get your real-life answer. So with rookies being the topic for this edition, I want to talk about your both rookie editions of your fantasy league. So Pat, since you did not join us last time, tell us about your first season doing fantasy and how awful it was.
Wow. Yeah, ask the old guy. My first ever fantasy pick was Marianne Butts.
Okay.
And that was 1993, I believe. I know it took Bledsoe second. No, I wasn't exactly a late round quarterback in my first draft. So I took the running back and the quarterback for the Patriots at the time. I thought Bill Parcells was gonna take him to the promised land, I guess. But yeah, I didn't do so well, but I quickly got hooked, and I would say I'm still hooked.
Okay, so 93. I'll keep that in mind. Brandon, what about you?
Yeah, I think I started in 2008.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So you're pretty new, relatively new.
Yeah, 8 years.
Yeah.
But I started with 3 leagues, so
Wow.
I've never played in less than 3 fantasy leagues. So I was actually on a theater forum. Yes, in 2008 we still had forums, and someone said,
wow,
"Hey,
that is like two worlds colliding too." So
yeah, this guy who actually I used to date, ironically, was like, "Hey, does anyone want to play in a fantasy football league?" And I said, "I do," but I didn't even know what fantasy football was. I just knew that fantasy was a nice word, and I loved football, and I missed it because I was a Broncos fan, am a Broncos fan, and I was living in Minnesota, and they didn't have the Broncos games really, so I kind of watched, kind of didn't, before fantasy, I was just kind of a homer. That was it, So I said, yeah, maybe it's like Dungeons and Dragons plus football or something was what I was thinking. And that's kind of what it is.
Like it's exactly.
Yeah. Ends up I wasn't so far off. But yeah, and when I heard about it, someone else was like, "Oh, you want to be in mine?" I was like, "Sure." I didn't think it was weird that you'd be in 2. So then I also called my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad," because my dad played college football, and I said, "Why don't we play fantasy football as a family?" And he was like, "Oh, honey, that's a lot of work. I mean, you got to get up early, you get out the paper." So my dad used to play it back in the day. I didn't even know he used to play it. So we started a family league too because I was like, "No, Dad, computers happened." And he was so excited. But, actually, my first league, I can't remember. My first draft pick, it was Pierre Thomas's rookie season. And I took him in the first round.
Okay.
Because I was new and I just listened to a bunch of podcasts and stuff and I crammed and I was like, everyone loves this guy.
Over and over again. Wow, okay.
Yeah. But then, this is where I was genius though. So I actually ended up 3rd in that league. I was 2nd in another league and then 4th in another. So I was in the top 4 in all of them.
Good God. From the get-go.
From the get-go.
Jesus.
But what I did was, at the end, I drafted Kurt Warner. Remember, that was when when Leinart was going to be the guy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
and
geez, that was, yeah.
Everyone started laughing. They were like, "Oh, my God, Brandon, he's not even the starter." I said, "Well, I know football, and I'm telling you he's going to be the starter." And literally the next day, he was named the starter, and I got him in, like, the last round, so I was hooked. That was it.
And
like,
a star was born after that. So
Yeah.
Truly, that's where quarterback value started. So.
There you go.
Well, I started actually pretty close to you, Pat. I think it was 94. And yes, I was 9 years old. And my dad's work league needed another team, and he knew I liked football. Like, I knew the players, and I knew the stats and all that, and they needed another person. So I took the place, and it was a money league. And my mom financed my team and just let me make all the moves. And that was when, and Pat, I don't know if you remember this, but that was the Curtis Conway, Isaac Bruce heyday when they dominated. Like, they both came out of nowhere and had like 1,000-yard seasons. And I'm pretty sure I rode that to like the championship. I didn't win, but I think I made it. And, like, all my dad's friends were pissed off because it's like, who is this, like, 9-year-old? And, like, I'm bringing the paper to, like, 4th grade. I actually got in trouble one year because I brought the paper and, like, my teacher saw what I was doing. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I told her. She's like, is this for money? And I go, well, yeah, like, why else would I be doing it? And she's like, okay, well, I need to talk to somebody about this. And sure enough, she like called a police friend and like wanted to make sure it was okay. And luckily, I got off the hook because that police friend also did it. Yeah, the police friend also did it too. So he was like, it's fine, like it's not a big deal. But it taught me a valuable lesson, kids. Don't do fantasy in school because they will bust you on that. But anyway.
Wow.
So as you can see, we the three of us have a very wide range of when we started and how we started and all that kind of good stuff. But I think everyone's story is always fun and interesting and all that good stuff. So with that out of the way, let's get into some news and notes. Some fairly late breaking news, at least for this edition. Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Jets end their stalemate. He did sign a one-year deal. He will be back in New York. Pat, our long national nightmare is over. What does this do to Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Jets?
Well, I mean, you kind of want to slot Fitzpatrick probably. Obviously, a quarterback 2. He's got upside on a weekly basis, depending on who he plays. But I don't think it does a heck of a lot to move our rankings of Decker and Marshall. I think we kind of figured this was going to happen, and even if it wasn't, there was still a faint hope that Geno can at least approximate what Fitzpatrick did last year. I think in general, for the continuity of the entire offense, especially with some new pieces, like Forte, if Amaro's getting worked back in, it's probably better off. I think Fitzpatrick, as a veteran, could probably run the offense a little bit smoother, at least to start, than Geno would have. So, I mean, I think it's a positive overall for everybody, kind of like a rising tide lifts all ships, but I don't think it dramatically alters the projections for the big 2 wide receivers.
So, Brandon, where are you putting Fitzpatrick then? I mean, he did finish, technically, to much surprise, as a low-end quarterback 1 last year. Is he going to do that again, or are we going to tap the brake a little bit on that?
I'm tapping the brake a little bit. I think that, there's going to be a little bit of, crawling back to the mean for him, which is not usually where you want your quarterbacks to be on your fantasy team. I do think he'll have some good weeks, though. I think that, again, he's always kind of been a hills and valleys guy, and I think he'll continue that. But it's hard to have too low a valley when you have Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker there. They're quarterback proof, they're team proof. They just continue to produce and produce and produce. So I actually included it. I did a fantasy devil's advocate about if Fitzpatrick isn't there, that they would be terrible. And I said, well, if Eric Decker put up 962 yards with a Michael Vick and Geno Smith hybrid of a season, I just think anything's possible. So I feel fine about that.
Let's not forget his awesome season with Tim Tebow. With truly all things are possible if that's the case. So.
Well, yeah, I mean he almost hit double-digit touchdowns, and he got like 672 yards or something. That was his sophomore season. He wasn't even supposed to be a big deal yet. And yes, it was Tim Tebow. And then from then on, it's just 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns for the guy. Unbelievable.
Okay, yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. The receivers will be fine. And look, they added Matt Forte too. He's not, he's not anything to bypass either. I
think that's huge for Fitzpatrick, actually, is having Matt Forte.
Right.
That's actually the biggest thing.
Honestly, it could offset any sort of regression that he might have had, and make him at least a little closer to that quarterback 1, quarterback 2 line. But all right, so the other signing that happened in the last couple of days, Anquan Bolden. Who, let's all face it, he's just a nice guy. We just like him. Like he's a player's player, all that kind of good stuff. Signed in Detroit for a 1-year deal. A lot of people are saying, Pat, that he'll slot right into that 3rd receiver role. Is that where you see him? And if so, what's his fantasy projection there?
Assuming he sticks, and I don't want to make that assumption just yet. I mean, he's turning 36 in October. How he wins, he doesn't really win with speed and athleticism at this point. He hasn't for quite some time. So it's probable that he still has something left to give. But they have Curley, they have Andre Roberts, T.J. Jones, in addition to Tate and Marvin Jones. So it's not like it was a huge fall off after Tate and Jones. So if Bolden is completely washed, which I think there's a non-zero chance that he is, he might not make the Week 1 roster. That contract might not guarantee Week 1. Quinn came from New England, and New England has made habit of signing these older players, and if they got nothing left, they cut them loose. And whether it's Torrey Holt or Reggie Wayne or Ocho Cinco after a couple games, if they're not going to contribute, they cut them loose. So this guy Bob Quinn was groomed as in the Patriots organization. So if Bolden doesn't have anything left, then he's probably going to get cut loose. But assuming he does, I would probably say he's wide receiver 4 or 5. I mean, if he plays in the slot, he played 67% in the slot last year. He's kind of redundant with a lot of their other targets. They all had pretty low ADOTs. I guess you're going to have Marvin Jones on the outside stretching the field a little bit. They might have to put Ebron on the outside to stretch the field a little bit. He's got some speed, especially for his size, so that might be more of a downfield threat on occasion. I can't imagine Golden Tate is going to start all of a sudden, put out a 9 or 10 yard ADOT out of nowhere just to accommodate Bolden. So Bolden himself, I'm not very interested in him and his fantasy production. I'm curious to see how it's going to affect everybody else. You might take a tick off everyone else. But we can't forget Bolden had a 3.9% touchdown rate over the last 5 years, and sure, last year was with a dumpster fire offense, but he has played on some decent offenses in that last 5 years. So I don't think he's necessarily going to really eat into Ebron or Marvin Jones's touchdown upside.
So Brandon, Pat brings up a good point, I should say. Is there, what are the chances Bolden's still there when the season starts? Because like Pat said, I mean, it's not unreasonable for teams to bring in veterans. It's a training camp body, that kind of stuff, and then when it comes to showtime, they cut them loose. So are you, pretty secure that Bolden's going to be there for week 1, or is it still up in the air for you too?
I think he's brought in there for the team as part of the veteran leadership that they're going to need to completely resurrect this offense after Megatron's departure. I think that he's right now the current Walter Payton Man of the Year. He is incredibly respected. I don't know if they would bring him in and cut him right away. I think that this was something that they'd been thinking about for a while. As far as whether or not he's going to have a Steve Smith Sr. type of resurrection, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that they did bring him in for a reason. Again, because of the repetitive nature of sort of where he plays on the field. But hey, I guess I think that I'm looking at camp for the Detroit Lions in general. I think their offense is going to be very different. I'm a Jim Bob Cooter believer, and I believe we should say his name on every single podcast. But I'm very interested to see what this is going to look like without Calvin Johnson, and I think that Anquan Bolden's brought in there to kind of band-aid it. And that's not a great fantasy answer, but I think that's your football answer.
It's going to be interesting to say the least. I think you're absolutely right about that. And that's, you bring up probably the biggest elephant in the room. It's like, hey, what are they going to do without Calvin Johnson now? It's a lot of, good to, average players there as far as skill position goes. And it's not a guarantee that thing's going to work without him. With Bolden, it's just... Yeah, I mean, look, he was very good last year, like you said, Pat, in not that great of offense. He was PFF's 43rd ranked receiver, despite being on a team that was 24th in pass attempts. So he still, in a vacuum, did pretty well. It's just a matter of, is he going to see that same kind of attention in Detroit?
And he was 43rd in points, but he was 33rd for our grade. Right. So when it comes to being overall, he actually outperformed his possibilities based on how terrible they were. Oh, San Francisco, it just hurts.
No,
it hurts.
They were terrible, believe me. It's and we'll get to that in a moment. Believe me, there's plenty of
one more thing in his favor as far as sticking with the team is he does have a history with Jim Caldwell for Baltimore. So I think he'll probably get the benefit of the doubt unless he is totally washed up.
I forgot my one good tip. No revenge games. The guy's been on 3 teams, and they're not playing any of them.
Is that good or bad? I would think that would be bad.
Well, I'm just saying for people that are in the narrative street, though. Yeah, so you don't even have that, is what I'm saying. Like, there's that's not going to happen.
Downgrade.
But how weird is that?
Which, by the way, fun fact, so Anquan Bolden set the rookie record for most receiving yards in a game by a rookie with 217. He had 10 catches and 2 touchdowns for the Arizona Cardinals, but do you know who he was going against in that game?
Nope.
Okay, it's pretty obvious.
The Detroit Lions.
Detroit Lions. Thank you.
Yay!
Okay. So really, it's all coming full full circle at that point.
That's right.
All right, so moving on to another receiver who is going to definitely see more action than Anquan Bolden this year. Jordy Nelson coming back, obviously, from a torn ACL. Everything appeared to be on track, but now there's news that he's suffering from knee tendinitis from a result of overextending himself trying to get back from that torn ACL. So my first question, and I'll ask you, Brandon, first, where were you putting Jordy Nelson, before this little piece of news, and does this do anything to affect that?
Well, I put him at 8. I have
Okay.
not moved him yet. I will. Reason being, 3 out of the last 4 seasons, he had over 1,200 yards in each of that. It's like, when you look back at what he's done, it's pretty remarkable. And I thought, well, obviously this team really needs him. But yeah, this makes me a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. I think there are other people that I am going to move ahead of him, but I haven't done it yet. So I'm just being honest.
Pat, what about you?
I had him at 10, just after Alshon and Keenan Allen. But I'm going to move him. Actually, I have moved him back behind Evans and Marshall, just for now, until we hear a little bit more. I mean, it's concerning. I mean, it's nothing to freak out about, but I mean, it's certainly a concern. And it's not just a concern for Jordy Nelson's production; it's a concern for the entire offense. You saw what happened to them last year when he was out. So yeah, it's kind of we're in a wait to see mode. Hopefully, you don't have to make this decision right away in NFL 10s or whatever. But I mean, you're picking at the end of the first round there, or excuse me, end of the second round, and there are safer players at this point that you probably want to spend that high draft capital on. You can even look at Cooks or T.Y. Hilton after that. So for now, I'm worried about him, and I'm worried about Randall Cobb.
And I think when I was doing some research for this topic, it surprised me how high Nelson was. I mean, he's 8th in Fantasy Pros rankings. He's 12th in NFL rankings. And like you said, Pat, he's ahead of some guys like Brandon Cooks, T.Y. Hilton, Mike Evans, Alshon Jeffrey, which even before this news, I personally probably would have taken any of those guys ahead of him just because the ACL, and he's 31, and it's just a big question mark. And that's not to say, Brandon, the point isn't lost that he has done extremely well the last couple of years, and there's no reason that he's not going to, slip right back into that same spot. But yeah, it's the knee, man. I mean, that scares me. That scares me a lot. Even before this little hiccup, which, look, the less hiccups, the better as you get closer to week 1, obviously. But yeah, it just surprised me how high he was, and yeah, it would, I guess, make me nervous if he's my wide receiver 1. You know what I mean? Which, if he's ranked in the top 12, that's what he is. And you just got to be really, really sure that you can roll with that guy for this year for him to be your number 1. But all right. So now moving on to truly, Pat, a dumpster fire, the 49ers quarterback position, which surprisingly, as I mentioned on Twitter earlier today with our other co-host, Mike Tagliere, which, by the way, Tagliere, not Taglieri, like I've been saying this whole time. I'm surprised how much talk this battle has gotten between Colin Kaepernick and Blaine Gabbert. It appears Blaine Gabbert is he's the incumbent. He just is. But Colin Kaepernick did get cleared by the training staff today. I don't know. Pat, is there anything here, or is it pretty much, hey, it doesn't really matter because they're going to draft Deshaun Watson next year anyway?
Well, there's a number of layers to this dumpster fire.
There's layers? Really, Pat? Is there layers? It seems pretty simple to me.
Well, I mean, yeah, you have the Chip Kelly quarterback. So, I mean, people are immediately equating Gabbert's ceiling to Nick Foles in 2013, when he had like 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and he came out of nowhere, and it's like, well, if Kelly can make Foles what he was, Kelly can do this for Gabbert, who apparently last year showed some people more than he showed me or our graders or the statisticians. But it's also a situation where this 2015 last year and this 2016 49ers roster is not even close to the 2013 Eagles roster. That was a good team. I think they graded 10th by our graders. They won the division. They won 10 games. They had a really good roster, a good supporting cast, and he threw the 28th most pass attempts that year. So they basically hid Foles, and that's how his production kind of came about. So to automatically just put Gabbard into that production when who knows if Foles is worse, better, or equal to Gabbard in general. I think that's quite a leap. If I had to choose, I would certainly choose Kaepernick. I was talking about this last night on Twitter. I think he's going to be the Week 1 starter. If not, he'll start more games. But I'm not in love with any of them, and even with the pace, I love Chip. I love his pace. It's fun for fantasy, but I'm more interested in the compilers in that offense. I'm more interested in Torrey Smith or Bruce Ellington or Vance McDonald or Carlos Hyde. I mean, Gabbard. There's a couple numbers of Gabbard last year. He had a couple decent games, and then from week 12 through week 17, he was the 39th of 39 passers in our grading. He took the second highest rate of sacks when pressured. So then this is back to Gabbard's bugaboo his entire career, which he folds in the pocket. He sees ghosts. He doesn't know pocket awareness. His 60.8 passer rating while pressured was almost as bad as his rookie year, which was like historically bad rookie year. So he wasn't better last year. He was the same old Blaine Gabbard. So to automatically throw him into Nick Foles 2013 is skipping a lot of steps, a lot of layers, and I'm not on board with that.
So Brandon, Colin Kaepernick, Blaine Gabbert, or Bruce Ellington, go.
Oh, you knew I had Bruce Ellington in my notes. You knew it. Well, I will say this. I believe that either Kaepernick is going to be the starter because Chip Kelly's intrigued by his skill set and thinks that he can get playoff Kaepernick back. I mean, if we think that we can get Josh Gordon back for 2013, why can't we get Kaepernick back? That's my question. Sure. So he might say, hey, I'm a quarterback guru, and this is the guy with the higher skill set. I'll take him. Depending on how he comes back from injury, again, just cleared, we don't know. But what I will say is that if they do go with Gabbert, I think they're going to straight up RG3 Kaepernick. I think he'll barely be on the field. I think he'll be in his workout clothes. I think then they're done. Then they just have to be done. And also if they go with Blaine Gabbert, then again, Bruce Ellington, Gabbert, only averaged 7 yards per aimed throw. And who's going to be in the slot grabbing those 7-yarders?
Let's say it together, Pat. Bruce Ellington.
Bruce Ellington, my slot guy no one's drafting. Get it together.
All right.
Those are my notes.
To your point about Kaepernick, real quick. I mean, they've stuck with him. I mean, through all the drama this offseason and last season, through a contract that they could have walked away from, that's expensive for a backup. Through all his injuries, he's still there, and he's there, I would imagine, because Chip Kelly realizes that Blaine Gabbert's not the guy.
Yes, Pat, you've made that point very clear.
I feel like piling on a little bit. It's not really revolutionary to say Blaine Gabbert is bad at football, but
it's not a hot take, Pat. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's a fairly lukewarm take.
You're going to get a lot of hate Twitter on that one, I'm sure.
I'm just surprised how many people.
The Blaine Gabbert truthers out there are coming for your head. So, all right. Well, let us take a quick break, and when we come back, we will get into some rookie talk. All right, welcome back. And for this portion of the episode, we are going to get into some very extensive rookie talk for this upcoming season, primarily with redraft leagues in mind, so not dynasty, not best ball or anything like that, just straight redraft, and it could be standard, PPR, etc. So, Brandon, why don't you lead us off first? You wanted to talk about Laquon Treadwell from Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm a Laquon Treadwell believer. I'm there. I am there. I know. Okay, fine. He had some injuries.
Can we talk about his targets then, Brandon? Can we talk about his targets? Because I don't see where they're. But you're going to tell me where they're coming from. So.
Well, I'm going to tell you about his the depth chart on the Minnesota Vikings at the wide receiver position. That is what's most intriguing to me. You got Stephon Diggs, a 5th-round draft pick out of Maryland who suffered with injuries throughout his entire college career. You got Jarius Wright, 5th-year guy who has never gone over 600 yards in a season. Charles Johnson, a former 7th-round pick that's on the roster bubble. Don't even start me on Cordero Patterson. And the problem is, it's just Laquon Treadwell. It's just him, himself, and him. I mean, I don't know what you would do with me, myself, and I, but it's that. And I don't know how there's going to be anyone else that's going to compete with him at that position. Now, the thing is that, of course, Teddy Bridgewater has a weaker arm, and definitely they're going to be running Adrian Peterson. But I think they're trying to not lean on Adrian Peterson as much because Father Time is undefeated And I'm not saying that this is the year, but I think they don't want this to be the year, and that's why they want to protect Adrian Peterson. I think they're going to use a little bit more of their other running backs. I think they want to throw the ball. Supposedly they brought Norv Turner in there for a reason. You know, they keep saying they want to change their offense, and they just don't do it. I think this is the year, and I just think that he's going in the 10th round, and that's the highest he's going to go, because there are a lot of people doing keeper drafts right now, things like that. I think that people are going to kind of fall off with this guy. I think it'll be And also he'll be someone that maybe isn't great in the first 3 weeks. Someone drops and you can pick him up. I just think at the end of the season we're going to be impressed with Laquon Treadwell.
What is your, projection, or what do you think he's capable of his rookie season? I mean, are we talking 1,000 yards? Are we talking 10 touchdowns? Or do we got to scale it back a little bit?
I mean, I think he's going to be probably more in like the 800 to 900.
Okay.
But I think he'll either be low double digits or high single digits, because I think they want to throw the ball more in the red zone. Because, I mean, look at how many times AP got stuffed.
Yeah.
Stuffed at the goal line. So I think they're really going to try to mix it up. So I think he's actually going to be a more of a red zone target than we think.
Well, and just a quick note on that. So I was mentioning targets before. You do have the 72 targets that are not there anymore, thanks to Mr. Mike Wallace leaving town. Stephon Diggs finished with 84 targets last year, and I think we can agree that Treadwell will probably be the #1 target by the end of the season, which could mean Diggs loses some targets, but Treadwell gets those 72 and then some. But I know Pat is going to rain on our parade, so Pat, it's all yours.
I like Treadwell. I do. I mean, I know we're talking redraft and not dynasty. So in this case, I'm looking at the current Minnesota Vikings. I mean, this is a team that is built on the running game. It's built on defense. It's head by Mike Zimmer and Adrian Peterson. When this is probably going to be a swan song in Minnesota. Last year they had the 3rd highest percentage of plays that were runs. They had the 3rd lowest no huddle rate. They ran the ball the 5th fewest times. Excuse me, they passed the ball the 5th fewest times. I just don't know. I think he's going to get a decent size of the pie, decent percentage of the pie, but I don't think the pie is very big. And Stephon Diggs is athletically, at least measurables, superior to Laquon Treadwell. He was riffing last year with Teddy. I'm not sure Laquon Treadwell is the #1 receiver at the beginning of the season, and like you said, Michael, he may be at the end. So in MFL 10s, he's going in the 8th round. And at that point, I'm a lot more interested in the tight ends and the running backs and some of the other wide receivers. I'd rather take Eifert or Darius Green or Charles Sims or Theo Riddick or T.J. Yeldon or Torrey Smith or Tavon Austin. I'm more interested in those guys at that draft range. Next year, when AP's gone and you got Teddy in the shotgun a little more, and he's got another year under his belt, another year with Treadwell, absolutely. I think he's going to certainly improve at that point, and I'll be more interested about it then. I just don't think that at an 8th round ADP, he's somebody that I'm interested in.
Okay. As we're doing, Pat, you're talking about some rookies that maybe won't be doing as well as some people might have thought. So, Brandon, now it's your turn. Will Fuller, receiver from Houston, somehow drafted ahead of Josh Dotson, which if anyone can explain that to me, feel free. But Will Fuller, you're not expecting a lot of good things from him this year.
I just think that if you're the deep threat on a Brock Osweiler-led offense with DeAndre Hopkins on the field, I just don't know how positive we can be.
What's the point?
His situation is just not favorable, and unlike Laquon Treadwell, he does not have the opportunity to be the wide receiver 1. Sorry, Will Fuller. It's just that's DeAndre Hopkins. Period. End discussion. So. And that's my thing, is that when I'm drafting between, like, let's say the 8th round and the 12th round, I'm looking for guys that I think could be the #1 guy at some point in the season, and I will want to play. I never want to draft guys that I would never play. But we all do it, right? You have that guy that you just never would put in, and I think Will Fuller is that guy this year. I cannot see a situation where I would feel confident, unless DeAndre Hopkins gets hurt, which we have no evidence that will ever happen. I mean, obviously anyone can get hurt, but he's never missed a game. So I don't. It's not even one of those situations where it's like, well, on like an Arian Foster thing, like, well, when he misses these games. I just feel like it's a unfavorable thing. And then on top of that, he dropped 13.9% of his passes last year, and we don't want to make too much out of drops, but we don't make too much out of drops when they have volume. So if he's not going to get the volume and he's going to drop 15% of them in the NFL from Brock Osweiler, which they're not going to be the most beautiful balls thrown in the world, then I just don't see how we can feel confident this year going in with him. And right then, that same area where he's going, you've got the Philip Dorsetts of the world, Rashard Perriman, which, by the way, Mike Wallace just failed his physical at camp. Rashard Matthews, who I actually think might end up being one of the top targets in Tennessee. And Mariota, he's kind of one of those guys. Is he going to be good? Is he not? But I think that's actually more interesting to me than Will Fuller behind DeAndre Hopkins with Brock Osweiler.
Yeah.
Pat, you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's even more pronounced than what I was thinking with Treadwell, that it's going to be tough on a weekly basis to figure out when you're going to want to start him. Fuller is that times 10. So in a best ball format, as a late round stab, maybe we might have one of those games where he catches 2 balls for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then the next game he gets no targets. He's still competing with Jalen Strong. That's an offense that looked pretty voluminous last year if you look at the full season totals, but once that defense picked up mid-season, they ran 10 fewer plays, they didn't throw the ball that much, or nearly as much. And is there any evidence that Brock Osweiler is better than Brian Hoyer? Because the statistics, the grading, don't say
We're going to find out this year, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, other than his contract, I'm sure Bill O'Brien and whoever signed off on that contract certainly thinks so, because that was a pretty big deal. But, I mean, to this point, Osweiler certainly has been outplayed by Hoyer. Not by a lot, but enough to make you nervous if you own DeAndre Hopkins or any of the other receivers.
Well, let's face it. If DeAndre Hopkins does go down, wouldn't they just run the ball with Lamar Miller like 50 times a game? That's what they bought him in for. He can do it.
They're going to do that anyway.
He can do it.
Free Lamar.
That's right.
Free Lamar.
I'm so glad he's out of Miami. Like I had like happy dreams.
Aren't
for, like,
we
a
all?
week.
And honestly, that was like the best situation he could. And they've straight up said we're just going to give him the ball, which is fantastic. So, all right. So those were a couple of receivers. There are some running backs, obviously, in this class. We won't really touch on Ezekiel Elliott because I think we all agree he's going to be really, really good and probably should be drafted in the first round. So let's get to some lesser-known running backs. Pat, you wanted to talk about Jordan Howard out of Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super intrigued by Jordan Howard. It's when you look at the depth chart around him, it's not exactly insurmountable. I mean, we all know about Jeremy Langford, who's arguably the worst running back in the league last year. Was last in elusive rating and yards after contact per attempt. He can't pass block. He dropped a ton of balls, and then he put on weight, which I'm sure is going to help him be even more elusive. So I think that Howard can certainly, at some point, and probably some point soon, overtake him. And if you look back, you kind of want to do an apples-to-apples comparison. In college, as a 19-year-old, Howard was better than Langford in rushing grade, passing grade, blocking grade, and elusive rating, and Langford was 22. So Howard was 3 years younger at college, and he was beaten with that. And then the next year, as a 19-year-old, Howard improved on all of those things. Chicago's got the 4th best run blocking offensive line according to PFF grading last year, and the team should improve. The defense certainly has improved. So I think he's going to get a few more, whoever the running back is going to get a few more situations in the red zone. Their receivers are actually healthy this year, or at least for now. So I think it's a situation where that's fairly appealing, and a depth chart that is paper thin. So Howard is definitely something I'm interested in.
Well, and a stat I found interesting, John Fox coached teams, that's a tongue twister, has only had one instance of having any running back have over 60% of the carries. So that's good for Howard because it means, look, it's not like Jeremy Langford's the bell cow there. But at the same time, it's not like, Jordan Howard's going to be the bell cow either. He's not going to come on and rush for 1,200 yards out of the gate. So, I think it's one of those, it's a good maybe flex position because, look, as you said, Howard's definitely the better receiving back out of those two. So if you had to pick one, it may be possible that Howard's the better one just because he's a little more versatile. So Brandon, what do you think about Howard?
Yeah, I think this is a C.J. Anderson, Ronnie Hillman quagmire that I would like to avoid in general. But yeah,
Right.
a best ball league or what have you, he'll get some touchdowns for sure. There'll be some big games. I think, again, this is going to be a situation where I don't feel great playing him unless something happens to Jeremy Langford. And even then, all of a sudden, Kadeem Carey is going to come out from the woodwork, and we're going to go, oh no, and again, as I had said earlier, I'm a Broncos fan, so I've watched these John Fox teams, and also he's just so slow to go with rookies.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Arians is the same way, to be fair. Remember, David Johnson had to pry that job from Chris Johnson, which was ridiculous. But still, they have to earn their place, and there is something to be said for that. And I'm not completely against it. I just feel like, you're going to have to be patient. You better have some bench spots because he's not someone you draft on, a redraft league that has a short bench. You won't be able to wait for that.
Right.
That's fair. And we shouldn't forget about Jacquizz Rodgers, who is probably the best pass blocking running back in the league. I mean, for what that's worth. And for a coach like Fox, that might be worth something, especially Cutler's getting his butt kicked a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll still smoke his cigarettes in the pocket.
He won't care, but
yeah. Right. All right. So speaking of running backs, I do want to talk about one that has gotten a lot of buzz this offseason. That would be one C.J. Prosise out of Seattle, the third-round pick, I believe, out of Notre Dame. I think that's correct. But he's gotten a lot of talk with his receiving game, and he's going to step right into the third down role. So, Pat, let's go with you first. What is his ceiling, for his rookie season? Is he somebody you can draft in a short standard league?
I would certainly be much more interested in a PPR league because I don't think he's going to get a ton of carries. I think Rawls is actually getting a little bit overlooked. Maybe it's the MFL 10 ADPs or whatever, but I mean, Rawls ran the hell out of the ball last year, and if he's healthy, he's going to get the carries. And it's not going to be CJ Prosise. I know there's been comparisons to David Johnson, and because he has a receiving background, and that is a good comparison and as a whole, but he's not quite there where David Johnson was as a runner. So I don't think that Prosise is going to be somebody that in a standard league you're going to want to be rolling out there on a weekly basis. I do think he's got upside. I do think Seattle is continuing to trend toward Wilson-centric offense. And they certainly drafted Prosise for a reason, and I think that's part of it. But I do think he is getting a little bit more hype than he deserves right now.
Okay. Brandon, do you agree with that? I mean, is he? I know you love Thomas Rawls, so where does Prosise fit in with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so crazy for loving 5.6 yards per carry from a guy that no one had heard of. Yeah,
he was an
I love him.
undrafted free agent, Brandon. Don't you remember? He can't be
that
good. So
I know. He and Doug Baldwin, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like Seattle's identity has been a single back system. Now, Marshawn Lynch is an incredible talent, and I think that sometimes we don't talk enough about him, or Jamal Charles, which I will rant about him on another show. But, they are incredible talents. I don't know if Rawls is that guy, but I will say that I'm having a difficult time envisioning how these two backs are going to work together in the offense as it stands. Now, they did make adjustments and what have you, but I felt the same way about Jimmy Graham coming to the team last year. I said, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't the offense that they run. Now, they did shift at the end. That absolutely happened. But that's because they had to. I'm not quite sure that they're going to go finesse back and the big back, and I don't see this kind of LeGarrette Blount, Dion Lewis situation happening that I think that people want it to be, and that Thomas Rawls will be the blunt, background guy who's just in the games that they're going to blow out someone anyway. I don't think that's it. I think they really like Rawls. Now, Rawls' injury hurt things, but I'm with you. I just feel like he's getting a lot of hype for a position that we haven't even seen on this team. So, right. I don't know.
Okay. Well, and it's one of those things where, now that training camp has started, now we will really see, the the rubber meeting the road here. Like, we're going to see for sure, okay, this is who's first string, second string, etc. Who can do well with pads on in practices and all that kind of stuff. And
finally, pads.
Right, I know, at long last. All right, so let's round out this episode. We had talked about a couple of first-round receivers in Treadwell and Fuller before. Let's talk about some second-round receivers. And look, second-round receivers can be pretty good. I mean, Allen Robinson, hello. So first up, I wanted to talk about Sterling Shepard from the New York Giants. He's going to be starting right away opposite of Odell Beckham. Nobody is fooling themselves to think he's going to take away Odell Beckham's job, obviously. But, I mean, that's a good offense to step right in, especially as a rookie. I think I have Ruben Randall, of all people, had 90 targets last year in that offense. So those targets got to go somewhere. And I can't imagine them piling on a lot more to Odell Beckham. So I think Sterling Shepard's in line for 80, 90 targets right off the bat. Is that crazy, Pat?
No, I don't think it's crazy at all. I'm pretty sure Victor Cruz is not going to usurp him. I think the Giants know that as well. I mean, look that they gave him a big contract reduction, and as much as we want to see Cruz come back and perform and be healthy and do what he used to be able to do, that'll be gravy if it happens. So I mean, Shepard's in a great spot. He's in a high-paced offense that they throw the ball a lot. Their defense has improved, but I don't think that's going to all of a sudden make them a ground and pound team. Shepard was our highest graded receiver in this class last year, both in passing game and overall. So he's well positioned. He's certainly not going to get the bulk of the defensive attention with Beckham on the other side. And we'll see who emerges at tight end. Hopefully it's Will Tide, because Larry Donnell is kind of depressing to watch. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on Shepard. I think his ADP is pretty fair. And yeah, I'm in.
So, Brandon, where does he fit in for you? You know, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 level? Is he, can he go that high?
Yeah, I mean, maybe wide receiver 4.
Okay, you don't sound confident, so.
Sterling Shepard's biggest problem is that he's in the New York market. So the cat's out of the bag, everybody knows, and he's already getting drafted as a wide receiver 4. He's not going to be a bargain. Right. You either have to pay for him or you don't. Everybody knows. Everyone has Odell Beckham Jr. in their eyes instead of stars, and that's fine. And he probably won't be on my team, but I think he's a fantastic football player, very good in the slot, spent almost 70% of his snaps there in college. So, could that be productive? Absolutely. But, they have a really weird running back situation there. Eli Manning's still seemingly upset about what he thinks is losing Tom Coughlin's job. I mean, it's not like it's been smooth sailing there either. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. is obviously smooth sailing, but everyone else is, there are a lot of kind of question marks. Everyone's just all in on this guy. So I think he will be great, but you will pay for him. I don't think that I don't think he'll outperform his ADP. How's that?
So let's say 15 roster spots, standard scoring league. Would he have a spot on your team with those kind of settings?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe, end of the bench kind of deal. He can be maybe a bye week guy if you're really thin at receiver. But he's somebody you can start at some point this season.
I think you have to draft him as your wide receiver 4 if you want him, and that's the lowest. I don't see him going any lower in any drafts I'm in or any ADPs that I'm seeing. He's going in the 8th round.
Okay.
So if you, I mean, that's my problem is I want him more like in the 10th where like Laquon Treadwell's going, because again, he's not going to be the wide receiver 1.
Right.
I know that. So
right.
It's just interesting to me that he's going, a solid 8, and it's only going up as far as I've seen. So either you are committed and you believe, or you will not get him on your football team. It will not happen by accident this year for you.
Okay. Well, let's cover another second round receiver who I personally am not as high on. That would be one of the Michael Thomases, this one from the New Orleans Saints. When he got drafted, I mean, people went crazy because they're thinking, hey, here's a receiver drafted high going to a very pass-friendly offense in New Orleans. But I don't know. I think people got to tap the brake on this. I mean, you've got a lot of targets out there that need to be reallocated, I guess. So you've got 110 that went to Ben Watson last year, but I'm pretty sure all, if not most of them, are going to Coby Fleener. And then you've got another 60 or 70 that went to Marcus Colston last year, which that's fine. That could slot into Michael Thomas very easily. But I can't imagine them drawing attention away from Brandon Cooks, obviously, or Willie Snead for that matter. I think 60, 70 targets is probably going to be the cap for Michael Thomas this year. Is that right, Brandon?
Yeah. Well, if you remember correctly, Marcus Colston was a frustrating fantasy player because he was very up and down. As far as what Drew Brees likes to do is he likes to spread it around. Everybody gets a little bit of love. I think we're going to see some Brandon Coleman games, too. That's just the way they are in the Saints. They're big on their tight end, and then everybody else gets a little piece of the pie. That's about it. Yeah, it's the weirdest. They're the only team in all of the NFL that's like that. But that's how it is. Because even New England, it's Julian Edelman. You don't need to worry about that. That's going to happen for sure. I have no idea. So I think he'll be a frustrating guy that I won't feel confident starting ever. So I just don't like drafting those guys. I would rather draft someone that I know I won't start unless something happens, but they have the possibility of being the guy.
Right.
Right?
Pat, what about you?
I'm a little bit more bullish on him, but overall I agree. I think he's probably going to maybe start a little bit slow. I know he's a hard worker from all anecdotal accounts. So he's been following Brees around like a puppy dog, and that's the way he was at Ohio State. He was graded fairly well by CFF, not spectacularly. I think if he does take on that Colston role, that's certainly something. Colston was super relevant and until he faded at the end of last year and was hobbling around. But I mean, his ADP has fallen on the rumors that, and ironically enough, that Bolden was going there. So it was like, well, Bolden's going to take Michael Thomas's role. And now Hakeem Nicks is apparently signing in New Orleans, and I worry about him a lot less than I worried about Bolden. So in a best ball league, when he's falling past the 10th round at this point. So I mean, I think if you want to diversify and you just get a cheap piece of a Saints offense, which could blow up in any direction in any game, I think he's worth taking a stab on at that point. But overall, I agree. They spread it around like you guys were talking about, and he's no way that you're going to be super psyched to start on a weekly basis.
Not super psyched at all. Not at all. So.
He'll be a great flyer in daily and stuff, though, because he'll be really cheap, and he'll have some huge games.
Oh, yeah, and look, that goes for anyone on that Saints offense, let's face it. Any receiver on that team at any time could win you some matchups on that. So, all right, well, good. Well, hopefully our listeners are now very much primed on rookies for this upcoming season. That will do it for this edition of the Fantasy Slant. I'm Michael Moore, along with Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Pat Thorman, and we will see you next time.